not just a volunteer event, it's also a chance to kind of see the state, take a camping trip, and maybe help monitor invasive species.
Hello again and welcome to another episode of Wisconsin's Outdoor Explorer podcast. I am your host, Jason. If you're listening to this podcast and you've been a regular listener of this podcast, I'm guessing you love the outdoors and you're always looking for ways to get outdoors. And this week, I'm talking to Natalie Dutack. She is an Aquatic Invasive Species and Watershed Groups Manager with the River Alliance of Wisconsin. And she is going to talk to us a little bit about invasive species here in Wisconsin, what we can do, and talk a little bit about an event they've got coming up this Saturday called Snapshot Day, where you can get involved and help them and help the Wisconsin DNR identify invasive species throughout the state. There's going to be different locations throughout the state that you're going to be able to get involved and help keep Wisconsin clean and help keep Wisconsin informed about invasive species. Let's get right to it, and here is my interview with Natalie Dutack. Natalie, I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
My first question to you is, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors?
It usually all does tie back into Wisconsin, which is why this is such a great opportunity to talk with you. But from my youngest age, it's probably going to be the Cathedral Pines up in the Vilas, Oneida County area. As a child, my parents would take me up north because my father wanted to go fishing, and he came from Argentina, and one of the first places he went to was the North Woods, and he thought it was amazing, and then my whole family started going up, and it's just that memory of just being under those trees and seeing the sun shine through, like the dappling of the shadows and the interplay of the light underneath, and then of course catching my first fish with him up there was fantastic. So it's probably several memories combined into one because I was so small. But
I'm really excited to talk to you today about the River Alliance of Wisconsin. Can you tell us a little bit about what River Alliance of Wisconsin does?
Sure. So River Alliance is an advocacy organization, and our mission is to empower people to protect and restore water. And, we were started by basically, paddlers, and included, students, professors, and it's built over the years on several issues. One big one that we're working on now is our Clearwater Farms program, where we're working with farmers who want to make sure they're utilizing the best practices, basically to protect our waters. We also work with people who are trying to protect the rivers from other things like mines. We had a big success last year where we helped Friends of the Willow Flowage campaign on a referendum to prevent sulfide mining in their county. And then we also do our AIS program, which in part is to protect waters from aquatic invasive species. I should say that AIS are aquatic invasive species. And that's a lot more outreach and engaging volunteers and getting people to, get excited about protecting their water. And then we also have fun things like paddling resources and again, other things to get people connected to the water so that they, again, are reminded about protecting what they love. Because in Wisconsin, we do love our water.
Yeah, most definitely. And you think about all the waterways and lakes and things we do have. It takes a lot, I would imagine, to be able to keep track of that, and you probably need a lot of help to do that, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's a lot of people already have the initiative, so whether we're helping, a small group who want to do something that need to reach more people, and then we help them do that. And then we're also reaching people who maybe didn't know that there were ways to get active or didn't know there were opportunities to protect their water. So there's a whole lot going on.
Yeah. So now your main focus is aquatic invasive species. I think when most of us think that, like for me, I always think the Asian carp. That's always the first thing that comes to mind. But it's more than just the Asian carp, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Asian carp it's a big one. It's pretty noticeable. People think about the carp jumping out and hitting people in boats. I mean, it's a little bit scary. There was recently a video that was posted online, I believe in Kentucky, where they were shocking the water, and you could see all the carp splashing around. So people are worried about the carp making its way into Wisconsin, and just because it is so prolific, But basically all invasive species, and most of the invasive species that I work with are smaller, but what they do is they harm the ecosystems. They can harm even wildlife health, human health, and also impact water quality. There's a whole lot of things that they can do, and it can be something as small as, 5 millimeters. That's like the New Zealand mud snail. It's a tiny little snail. And once it gets in, it breeds like crazy, and we're actually waiting on that one to see what it might do to the waterway.
What effects do invasive species have on Wisconsin?
With invasive species, there's certain traits that we are concerned with, because at the end of the day, I am with a background in ecology. I'm going to talk about how they impact the ecosystem and the ecosystem services. So we have an amazing suite of plants, animals, soil conditions and climate in Wisconsin that create a healthy ecosystem, and people think woodlands and prairies and rivers and lakes. When an aquatic invasive species shows up, it typically has no predator in the area because it didn't evolve in this region, and that can include things like pathogens that may have kept it in check in its native region. And then the other things, it's not beholden to the same impacts or the same controls that natives are. So they might start blooming a lot sooner or hold on to their leaves a lot later than native species, which means that they can shade out the natives and outcompete them. And then when you think about the wildlife that rely on native species, whether it's for spawning or for food, when that happens, you start just seeing a decrease in diversity of native species, which then impacts ecosystem health. And then we also think about recreation. We love to go fishing. Cold water angling in this state is one that we're concerned about. Any impacts to those unique riverine ecosystems, when you lose that diversity of species that trout can eat, people are starting to ask, how's that going to impact those populations, especially when you're already worried about things like climate change and water temperatures changing as well.
So how do these things get into the state? How does that happen?
There's a variety of different ways. Working with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, we look at pathways, one of which, is clearly recreation. We do a lot of work with the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, where we just try and remind people to clean off their boat, clean your prop, clean your trailer, drain your water before you leave, because, there are laws in the state that, tell people that is not allowed. And those regulations, sometimes can be enforced, but the biggest thing is personal responsibility. And most people do, stop and clean out their equipment, clean out their gear, just so they're not spreading species from lake to lake. And that doesn't just include, recreational fishing. That can include paddlers. That can, your jet ski, basically any activity you do in the water. Also things like organisms and trade. That's when you're going into a shop and you're buying an invasive fish or an invasive plant, and you're using it in a water garden or you're using it in an aquarium, and then maybe, a couple months later, a couple years later, you don't want them anymore. And a lot of people feel bad, letting something pass, and so they instead let it pass into the waterway, not realizing that it could, potentially become invasive. And there's a lot of aquatic plants that kind of get into the system that way. They look really great, they beautiful in the garden, but if you put them into the river, they're going to take over really quickly.
How many different varieties of species do you think are in Wisconsin that are invasive?
I know that there are over 240. I can check on the number. Let's just say over 200 for sure that we have under regulation. At River Alliance, we focus on about 20 to 25 species only, whether it's because it's a new species that we don't want to get into the state, or because it's something here and we're just trying to teach people how to identify it so it doesn't spread to new water bodies.
And do you see different varieties in different parts of the state, or different things in different parts of the state?
For sure. So if you think about the Lake Michigan Basin, that's a big region for Phragmites. It's common reed. It's a very tall grass. It's very abundant throughout the entire Lake Michigan Basin. And what we're worried about is whether it's going to, spread further west. And so that's definitely, it's a regional issue right now. There's a couple other grasses. One of them is Glyceria maxima. It's also in that region. So you've got a lot of different kinds of activity on the lake. There's a lot of urban development, but then there's also a lot of recreation that goes on. It's easy for those to spread, and we're just kind of trying to keep track of them. On this side of the state, in Madison, I mentioned the mud snail. Right now it's only in Dane and Columbia counties. and that one was actually spread, we think, through cold water angling. Because it's so small, it just hitched a ride on someone's waders. So we're hoping to kind of contain it to this area and let everybody know what it looks like. There are some areas that have the aquarium release plants. The Mississippi River area, the Winnebago Lakes area, they've experienced those. And that may not be so much regional as in what's going on in the ecosystem, as maybe there is a person or group of people who keep dumping this, plant, or it's escaping from someone's garden in that area.
It sounds like it's a lot to keep track of.
And
and I know you've got a day coming up here this Saturday, actually, where you have volunteers help you keep track of some of that stuff, don't you?
We do. It's a huge event for us and for our partners across the state. It is, as you mentioned earlier, it's called Snapshot Day, and it's a statewide monitoring initiative that we coordinate with Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and University of Wisconsin Extension. We came up with monitoring protocols with them, and it's kind of evolved from just a rivers-based program, looking at things like aquarium releases to include lakes and include wetland sites now. So there are about 30 sites, which means there are about 30 partners across the state who are hosting events, and it's just a great way to kind of literally get your toes wet and see what invasive species are, learn about the issues related to them, and then you get a really quick, 45-minute training about specific species in that area, and then you head out on a scavenger hunt to different sites and come back with specimens that you've gathered. So it's a great first-time experience, and it's a good way to connect people with partner organizations who are doing this work.
And this is open for everybody, right?
Everybody. I mean, we have a little caveat in there. We say, it's definitely family friendly. I think we put a cap of 8 years old is probably the youngest someone can be to really, get something from the training. But people are more than welcome to bring their kids. We had babies in strollers last year and, toddlers running around. So as long as your parents or the older kids are getting something out of it, to me, it's great just to see everybody outside and having fun.
So give us a little taste of what somebody can expect. You said they get a little bit of training, and then what happens? What would you have special equipment that they have to go out with, or?
Oh yeah, I'm actually right in the middle of that. I'm preparing supplies for all 30 of our site leaders. But yeah, so River Alliance does provide a set of supplies to everyone, and the site leaders also provide some supplies. And then because it is a team effort, a volunteer effort, we do ask our volunteers if they can bring something to use for the day, and those include tools like a hard-handled rake, which people can use to scrape vegetation off to take a sample out of a river or a stream. We, remind people to wear polarized sunglasses or use their personal phone to take pictures and share them. It's just little tools that anyone can bring to help gather the data and get it back to the site leader. It's not too difficult. I think carpooling is the biggest thing that we ask. Some people might not have a car or might not have room in their car, but that is one that we do ask for.
And you have little, you mentioned 30 different sites all over the state, and they can go on the website and check that out, right?
Yes. On our website, we have an interactive map with all 30 sites. If you click on the icons on the map, it tells you the name of the location and where it's at, registration is open through the 15th. So we're trying to get people connected to groups, up until basically 24 hours before the event.
They go out, they collect the information, and then what happens with that information?
Oh, yes. So all of this information, first it gets verified, and we are working hand in hand again with Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So they have aquatic invasive species experts. These experts basically verify the specimens, and then they work with the site leaders to enter them into a database that the Department of Natural Resources has called SWIMS, and that's Surface Water Integrated Management System. And it's actually a map that the public can access at any time, and it shows you what invasive species are in what water bodies across the state. So on snapshot days, someone could find a species that's brand new. That would be a great thing. That would allow the DNR to manage for it. They might find a species and they can't get a good enough specimen. Maybe they couldn't reach it, but they get a good picture of it. That becomes an observed species, and then it's something that, whether it's DNR or one of our partners, they go back out and they verify it. So then it gives us a point of reference, again, for a population that may exist for us to manage. But usually we're finding populations, some stay still, some move. it would be great to see some of them no longer be there.
Yeah.
But it's all used, and what people don't always know is that that data is available to the public. It's not just there for the DNR to manage. It's for everybody to see. So you can click on your lake or your river and find out exactly what's in it.
So how long have you guys been doing Snapshot Day?
This is the 6th year. We've made a bunch of improvements over the past year and trying to reach more groups and reach more volunteers. And I think the biggest change is just the sheer spread of sites across the state, and kind of trying to encourage people, or we're trying to encourage people to, not just hang out in Dane County or Milwaukee County, like check out some of the awesome places up north that we have. I helped vet sites up in Langlade County that were beautiful. Like it's not just, a volunteer event. It's also a chance to kind of see the state, take a camping trip and maybe help monitor for some invasive species.
Is this an all-day event, or is it strictly a couple hours, or can you give a little bit more maybe information about that?
Oh, sure. The schedule for Snapshot Day, some sites have a slightly modified start time, but it's basically starts around 8:30. So from 8:30 to 9:30, you have a registration. And then from 9 to 9:45, there's a training. And then basically from that point on, whenever that training ends till noon, you get to go out in a team and go on that scavenger hunt and find species at sites that the site leader provides for you. And then everyone comes back to their training site with their finds, and they kind of verify them and see if they were correct. And there's also usually a little celebration, a little recognition of their efforts. So basically 8:30 to 1. It all depends, on the size of the group, but we typically are closing up around 1.
If somebody's really looking for an opportunity to really kind of help make a difference on improving the state of Wisconsin's health, this is really a great thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's there's so many groups across the state. Like it's just you can get involved, you can explore, and then sometimes people are finding out that there was a group right in their own backyard they didn't know, and if they want to continue to stay involved or find new things to do, it's right there. So
I was thinking that's probably got to be your biggest challenge is for people who do go out. Most people aren't knowledgeable enough to know what is invasive and what isn't. I mean, like you said, this little snail in Madison, most people probably wouldn't even pick up on that, would they?
No, I mean, and quite literally wouldn't, because it's so small. Like it looks like a grain of dirt or sand sometimes. So, I mean, that is a challenge, but once people kind of get a taste for it, there's resources, there's training materials, and there's other organizations like the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network and Water Action Volunteers that do monitoring and also have resources. So it's just kind of building that structure, so building your knowledge base. And we're trying to help with that as well and providing like stepped training. There's beginners, and then here's a little more detailed information, and here's what the option of perhaps even learning how to manage these populations, because that's a big thing that people want to do. They might not know how to identify them, but they want to do something about it. They want to know how they can manage for them.
The Snapshot Day is a great opportunity for them to do that. Give us the way they can get a hold of you and learn more about this.
The easiest way is to go straight to our website, wisconsinrivers.org. There is a banner along the top of the screen, and Snapshot Day is up there waiting to be, accessed. And we have, again, that map showing all of the locations, and you can register. It's completely free. It's just a fun way to get out there. And the other option is just to shoot me an email, and I will help you find a site, if possible, close to you. And that's ndutack@wisconsinrivers.org.
Perfect. Now, Natalie, I want to thank you for joining me. But before I let you go, my last question to you is, what is your favorite part about working in the outdoors in Wisconsin?
Oh my gosh, just getting to be outdoors. So much of this job, ends up being, the outreach and meeting people and connecting people to each other, which is great. But I, was on a restoration field crew for many years, and I just love the opportunity to get outside and to see, for me, like the different types of natural communities we have. I mentioned being able to go to Langlade County this year. I went to Door County as well. I even, in the La Crosse area, I've helped vet sites in all those locations, and it just gives me a chance to be out there and see all the wonderful variety of nature that we have in the state, and it makes me pretty happy.
Well, that's great. It makes us happy that you are out there helping Wisconsin stay healthy, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit of information with us today. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
want to thank Natalie for coming on the podcast this week and talking to us about Snapshot Day and how you can get involved. Take advantage of this opportunity to be a part of keeping Wisconsin healthy. I'll put some links in the show notes on where you can sign up for Snapshot Day, how to get a hold of Natalie if you have any more questions about it. Here's a great opportunity for you to get involved and you to help make a difference in this state. It's a great program, and let's help it grow so that we're more informed about what's happening in our waterways. And this is going to be a great way that you can help Wisconsin, and it's also a great way that you can get out and be one of Wisconsin's outdoor explorers. Thanks again for joining me. I'm your host, Jason, and I will talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening to the Wisconsin's Outdoor Explorer podcast. For more great information about being an outdoor explorer, visit our website at wisconsinsoutdoorexplorer.com. Be sure to check out the blog page and follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.